Hello, hi, hey, welcome back. It's been a second since I did one of these reading reels where I kind of just talk about some book or something that I've been reading. I think the last time I did it, I was in high school. Um, and recently I've been reading some interesting stuff, thinking about some interesting stuff. So I said today, why not, while I'm having my coffee, enjoy going over some of these things because I think they're pretty useful. So, First off, this started by just thinking about how much effort it took me for a while to do certain things, mustering up effort, and the realization in that like effort means that there's resistance, internal resistance. And if you were to remove that effort, then there would be no need to put effort or to muster up something in order to do something. It would just flow. And that seems kind of obvious and intuitive, but for somebody who I think for a very long time was unable to either derive pleasure or allow myself to feel pleasure or ease is more of the word I would say in doing things, that it was kind of difficult. And I felt like in order to earn something or to do something right, it had to be a conscious effort, a fight, a struggle or something. And I think there's a really interesting book, um, The Immigrant Artist. I forget who it's by, but it kind of discusses this thought of like how this might be generational or cultural. And I think that's one aspect to it, but I think there's a broader context in like the type of culture we live in where um, doing things joyously, doing things easily, and also Puritan culture in the West. It's everywhere. All types of cultures have a version of this where struggle is the way. Through struggle and strife, you are proving that you're worthy of something. Um, However, most of the time in life, we find that joy or accepting or receiving things is kind of the easiest way to get towards something. And if you can remove resistance towards getting to a certain path, then that makes you move quicker, faster, easier, um, and overall enjoy the process itself. Um, and so yeah, let's just get into like what I've been thinking and reading. So Audre Lorde has this really cool essay called "Use of the Erotic." The erotic is power, which I'll link and add to the screen and stuff. Basically, Audrey derives the definition for erotic from the word eros, which means, um, basically, she says, I speak of it as an assertion of the life force of women, of that creative energy empowered, the knowledge and use in which we're now reclaiming in our language, our history, our dancing, our loving, our work, and our lives. Page 3. So, Audrey's definition to engage in the erotic means to be in touch with your feelings, your body, your soul while you're doing something. Keyword is while. And the whole point is that instead of falling into the arrival fallacy, which is basically that when you arrive at some goal or some point in your life, only then will you feel the success and the joy and the pleasure. And until then, you just have to kind of get yourself to that point. Usually, what happens is you get to that point and you either feel a lack of pleasure or nothing at all, really, and it's just anxiety and waiting till the next one. And it's very common in certain neuroticisms like ADHD and stuff that keep you busy all the time, waiting for that next hit of like, when am I going to feel like I've done it, or confirmation, and etc. And kind of this definition of eroticism is while doing. It kind of engages the process. It has to be through the process itself in which you find meaning and which you enjoy. Um, so let's pull up the essay itself. There's a part of it I really want to read you all. Okay. So she says, beyond the superficial, the considered phrase, it feels right to me, acknowledges the strength of the erotic into true knowledge, for what that means is the first and most powerful guiding light towards any understanding. Understanding is a handmaiden which can only wait upon clarify that knowledge deeply born. So I think she means that in order to get to the understanding or the outcome or whatever it is at the end that you would like to get to, it's only through what feels right that you're guided towards where you want to be. You can think about it, you can philosophize about it, you can make goals of what you want to be like, you can visualize it. But at the end of the day, it's what feels good. Sometimes you will visualize a certain thing for yourself, which may not actually be truly in alignment with what you want, but you believe it is. However, if you have to muster up all of the struggle and strife to get there, maybe it's not at all truly what you want. Maybe your body knows a little bit more than your conscious mind does. Maybe the data of your entire life and where you've been is not something that your working mind can keep that RAM, the memory that you have in this instant moment can remember, but maybe it's something that at the back of your mind or your physical body stores and it has been there throughout the years, even through times you don't remember. And it can tell you truly what does make sense for you and what doesn't. So it feels right to me. That's kind of what she's saying could guide us. She also says the sharing of joy, whether physical, emotional, psychic, or intellectual, forms a bridge between the sharers, which can be a basis of understanding, which is what for what is not shared between them, and lessens the threat of their difference. So it's also about human connection. So this process of enjoying the process itself instead of the outcome is a way to find human connection, which we all have a propensity towards and are guided to. And it's like something that does objectively give people, human beings, joy because it's better for all. And yeah. Um, so I think she also discusses the opposite of this, which would be the suppression of your true self and feelings, which would be emphasis on the output instead of the process. It would be doing while you're waiting for the finale. And she calls this sensation without feeling. So, sensation would be the result, the physics of doing it, not the actual feeling in your body. So, how would I say this? So, a sensation might be like excitement or something, but the feeling would be, I guess, happiness or joy. That's how I would describe it. So, as I said in the beginning, the arrival fallacy is actually a term coined by Dr. Tad Ben-Shahar, and it basically describes a belief that true happiness comes from accomplishing some goal. This leaves you hurt, anxious, waiting, dissatisfied until someday you reach this golden mirage. And sometimes it makes it seem unattainable because it's far away and it's not in the present moment. Um, and this affects a lot of things that I thought were interesting that Lorde talked about. It's not just about your enjoyment of life, it also affects how you engage politically, and it also engages how you work, which is a bit more obvious than the political point, which I'll get to. But in terms of work, she says such a system reduces work to a travesty of necessities, a travesty of necessities, a duty by which we earn bread or oblivion for ourselves and those we love. But this is tantamount to building a painter to. Such a system reduces work to a travesty of necessities, a duty by which we earn bread or oblivion for ourselves and those we love. But this is tantamount to blinding a painter than telling her to approve her work and to enjoy the act of painting. It's not only next to impossible, but it's also profoundly cruel. So, yeah, like the pushing ourselves to work towards a certain goal without being able to enjoy the process is it also robs you of the whole purpose of the experience. The painter, without being able to see her work, does not get the satisfaction of the process itself, or to see her how she's doing, or whether it matches the image she had in her mind. She doesn't get the satisfaction of the work. So, what's the point of improving her work? Even if she could find a way without seeing it to improve it, that would only bring pleasure to others, and her herself doing the act is self-sacrifice of the effort, the time, the money, um, and for what? Not even getting the pleasure of seeing your own progress. No point. And it's cruel, just for other people's satisfaction. Um, and let's get to the point of how does this apply to politics? Like, it seems kind of far fetched. What I'm talking about is like enjoying your life in the process. What does it have to do with politics? So, um, politics without spirituality, or at least without philosophy or the eccentric things, seeing it as just like a practical thing and like you gotta do XYZ to get to XYZ, kind of robs us of the whole experience of engaging in it and also makes it harder for us to engage in it effectively. So I'll explain that more, but let me picture this with what Audre's saying. She says uh, on page 5, when we live away from those erotic guides from within ourselves, then our lives are limited by external and alien forms, and we conform to the needs of a structure that's not based on human need, let alone an individual's. But when we begin to live from within, outwards, in touch with the power of the erotic within ourselves, and allowing power to transform and illuminate our actions upon the world around us, then we begin to be responsible to ourselves in the deepest sense. For we begin to recognize our deepest feelings, we begin to give up, of necessity, being satisfied with suffering and self negation, and which numbness, which so often seems like the only alternative in our society. Our acts of oppression our acts against oppression become integral with self motivated and empowered from within. So instead of just being disillusioned with suffering in the world as like, oh, I'm a good person and I don't want other people to suffer, and I want to do good in this world, that just results in identity politics, okay? It results in like, well, I'm a good person, so that's why I think XYZ should be the way people live because that's like what good people do. And it's what's good for everybody. That won't get us anywhere. That gives us the two-party system, that gives us unequal representation, that gives us people deciding for us. Um, Instead of doing things because you believe that you're a good person who knows what goodness means, and instead we do what feels like is good for ourselves, essentially, like being a little bit selfish, we engage in politics in a way which actually in turn does benefit the whole because we represent our own interests, and each person representing their own interests actually makes sure that we're not deciding for the other and we're engaging in a way where if it's in alignment with others, it's a coalition and we could do something about something. And if it's not in alignment with others, it's not enforced on the other either. So, real political activism is a lot of like boring work, mundane work, uh, because it's like voting, campaigning, volunteering, like being a part of budget meetings, giving your vote on opinions on how budgets are spent, protesting, other stuff like that. And it seems like it takes you away from your real life, your work, your family. It seems like it's you're taking time away from what is your real life in order to engage in something abstract. And the people that do it often muster up the willpower to do it because they're like, I'm doing good for other people. A sense of charity, a sense of piousness. But when you see it as you're doing something for your own self, then it is your life. Going to those budget meetings and deciding where your money's spent is your work. The money that you make, it's making money. Like, it's putting money towards the type of rent that you're going to pay. Now, the money that you earn will all be going towards a ridiculous amount of rent because the house prices are inflated and there's foreign investments because you yourself had your voice heard at the council meeting and you're like, no, we have to designate a certain amount of affordable housing. Um, Also, like engaging in certain policy debates and like voting and stuff kind of decides the quality of healthcare you get or how much you enjoy your city and like what types of activities are there or how long you stay in traffic or don't, how functioning is the transit system, like you and your family and the people you care about's enjoyment out of life is going to be as a result of you seeing your political work as part of your life because it is. It's not taking you away from your life. It is the process. It's not about the outcome. It's not about, oh, well, I'm only doing this work so that we can feed more people, and we can have affordable housing, or that we can have a better world. The outcome of a better world's not the point. The point is you engaging in those politically mundane activities, is you putting efforts towards your own self and your own community's like quality of life. And you can feel good about that. It doesn't have to be mustering up the courage just because you're a good person, you want to do good things. It could be entirely selfish. And that's actually a better thing. Maybe you'll show up more. If you feel like me coming here is like making money for myself, then you'll show up like you do work. You won't feel like you're being ripped away from something. It's equivalent. Um, and also, this kind of helps with the disillusionment and depression that we see in a lot of our society of like doomerism. I wrote an article about political apathy and doomerism back in like 2023 or 2022 or something in the Sanctuary magazine that's kind of about this. But like the only reason we feel so separate and lonely and isolated and like there's nothing we could do in this world as part of our generation is probably because we're not as active as other people or like older people are. So for example, back when like I used to engage with elections myself or volunteer in them, you kind of notice that the people that are most active in it, or the people that show up to town council meetings or come at like 7 a.m. to put their vote in, are usually over the age of 60 or something. And you never hear those people talking about like, oh, it's life now sucks and there's nothing we can do about it and I've just given up uh, and like given into the situation. No, they actually feel an active sense of involvement and joy, and they feel like their world is shaped by what they do, because it is, because they are shaping it by what they do. They're doing things to shape their world. So why would they feel disconnected from it? They're such an active part of its ecosystem, it needs them. And we could all do that. Um, and this also has to do with like our relationships to each other. So uh, in page 6, she says, to share the power of each other's feelings is different from using each other's feelings as we would a Kleenex. When we look the other way from our experience, erotic or otherwise, we use rather than share the feelings of those others who participate in the experience with us. And use without consent of the used is abuse. In order to be utilized, erotic feelings must be recognized. The need for sharing deep feeling is a human need. But within the Euro American tradition, this need is satisfied by certain prescribed sporadics coming together. These occasions are almost always characterized by simultaneous looking away, pretense of calling them something else, whether a religion, mob, violence, or even playing doctor. So, looking away from your responsibility for the collective and other people's feelings and sharing in them, instead just using it like to satisfy something within, like for example thinking you're a good person and doing politics for that reason. You're satisfying something within yourself that's like, I need to know that I'm a good person, so I'm only helping other people out to fix that within me, instead of sharing in that fact that like, oh wait, we all kind of live in a city where it's been a struggle and like a lot of our paychecks are put towards just necessities. You and somebody who lives in a shelter can kind of co uh, relate to each other in that you don't have to be like, whoa, they're suffering, and like it's just wiping some sense of piousness that you want, using their feelings for that rather than sharing with them what you can identify with. And like she said earlier, that brings me back to what I said in the beginning. um, The sharing of joy and even other feelings forms a bridge between shares, can be the basis of understanding of what is not shared, lessens the threat of their difference. This goes for class difference. We have everybody joining us. Say hi, Jingles. And yeah, so this kind of tells you that the experience that you go through with other people, or like engaging in politics or working or being in relation to others or whatever it is, the experience itself, not the outcome of what happens as a result of what you're doing, the experience itself is what teaches you about yourself and others. Here she mostly describes what it teaches us about each other. And how it like fulfills our desires and stuff. But there's a question and that she brings up that this is hard to do if you can't even recognize your own desires. You're just gonna do what like it is for other people, or what like fills your sense of self, or like using other people's feelings. You have to be deeply in tune with what you would like and want, and allow yourself to have that and enjoy things, in order to engage with those types of things. Meaning that like you have to be okay or accept or want life to be a thing about pleasure. Like what feels good is what I'm gonna do. Not in a hedonistic way. There's a difference there because that's sensation, not eroticism. That's also still looking for an outcome, doing something to feel good, not doing something that feels good. So that's for Haji Lord's essay. I've also been for a while now kind of like scrolling and watching. Greg had Greg had like an interesting podcast where he talked with the Hegelian ethos about this. But basically, JWF Hegel, sorry, has kind of like weird and self-contradicting philosophy sometimes, but if you really sit and go through the process of what he's saying, I think on a deeper level you start to like understand his way of thinking and try to apply it to things. It's hard to make like a concrete thing about like what's he talking about, but if you go through the process of his thinking by reading his work, it's like thinking he kind of just blurbs on the page, and you can like go through his trains of thoughts with him. Um, but anyways, like an interesting point that has to do with what we're talking about is the Hegelian method itself actually talks about examining your own consciousness, um, as an experience of yourself and the objects that elicit these feelings and contradictions and stuff. And through the process of doing this, you understand yourself. Basically, in easy terms, and it's kind of a dull moment when you use simple terms to describe it. It's just that your life and experiencing this world will tell you about yourself. And what does that mean? It means we are never able to look at something and know it for what it is by itself. We only know it in its relation to ourselves. What does he say? He says, I am certain of this item not because I, as a consciousness, have thereby developed myself and have variously set my thoughts into motion. It's not because I, as a consciousness, am certain of this item for the reason of the item of which I would I'm certain would be a rich relation of its own self. He's basically just saying like you're not sure that something is, other than the fact that like you see it or you perceive it or something. It just has to do with you at the end of the day. The thing could be there and be something else completely, but it's always about how you see it. And he calls this sensuous certainty. So the way I see this in relation to what I was saying earlier is that your relationship to joy is what determines its presence. Like you could have already joy in your life, but whether it's actually there or not is more about like whether you perceive it or not, or whether you accept it to be true. Um, and also, it obviously implies that the way we come about understanding is through understanding ourselves because of the process of looking at something. And this could be engaging in work, this could be doing something like cleaning a table just very intensely while taking everything in, being present basically. It's as simple as that. Being very present removes the resistance because you're not thinking about what will the outcome be or what I should be doing, just about what's happening. And sometimes you'll get revelations within that. And that's the process of living, anyways. Um, what else? So, Sina, which is Ibn Sina, has this book called The Book of Healing. And for the most part, it's a hard read, not just because it's a translation from Arabic, but also because um, he goes through many topics at once. So he does that traditional form of philosophy where it's like logical reasoning, and he starts from like very basic stuff like what's infinite, and it's like, oh, you can divide numbers infinitely and stuff. And then somehow he gets to medicine and other things. He starts at like very basic stuff and then builds on top of the principles to get to a point where he's talking about planets and like health. But the reason he does that is so that like it's logical and he's not assuming anything. He starts from the very basics so that when he gets to a point, it's like supported by all the previous things. And so he says that deliberation is meant to choose an action from many, not choosing an end. So that's like what the word deliberation means. And his point, in some point, is that nature itself, it's not like fate is decided or something. He argues. He says it's not like nature does its things so that there's some end outcome. It just does out of various options of actions, it just picks one, and usually random. And he justifies this, like, why is it random? By saying the opposite. Why, as humans, are we not random the way nature is? And the reason is because we have personality and personhood. We have likes and dislikes. Um, and because we have likes and dislikes, when we're given many different options, not just likes and dislikes, other things, biases, experiences, blah, 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 the things that make you a human being. When you're given many options for action, you pick the one that goes along with those narratives and beliefs and personality and things like that. Not just what comes next. But sometimes we do go into that mode of just picking the next random option. It's not always optimized, it's not always personalized. Sometimes it really becomes the next random thing. Not because of the outcome it gives, but because in the process it makes sense. Sometimes because it feels good. And the example he gives is a writer or a lute player. So I'm going to read you this part. So Ibn Sina writes, it does not follow from the fact that nature lacks deliberation that we must judge that the action proceeding from it is not directed towards some end. For deliberation is not in order to make the action have some end, but in order to designate the action that's chosen from amongst actions that must be chosen. Each one has some end proper to it. So deliberation is for the sake of specifying the action, not for the sake of making an end. And were the soul spared of various opposing likes and dislikes, an ideal and uniform action would proceed from it without deliberation. If you want to become clear on this point, consider closely the case of art, for undoubtedly it is for the sake of some end. Once it becomes a habit, however, doing it no longer requires deliberation. And it becomes such that when deliberation is present, it is nigh on impossible to do, and even the one well versed in its performance becomes befuddled in its execution. An example would be a writer or flute player, for when they deliberate about the choice of one letter after another, or one note after another, and intentionally become preoccupied with their instruments, they then become befuddled and perform haltingly. They continue what they do uniformly only by not deliberating about what each of the successive things they continue to do, even if that action and its intention initially occurred through deliberation. So, most readings think that this is like the Aristotelian point that one doesn't deliberate about what's good or what appears to be good, but only the means to acquire that good. Like what sounds good to improvisation is one. Maybe you can memorize the sheet notes that you're playing, you know, but even in memorizing them, you don't. That's not an example where you're picking the next thing to do. So we would choose more improvisation or writing. It's not like you think about the next word. You have a thought about the end that you want to get to, and the next action chosen sometimes is just whatever one comes up, or one of the many, or a random one, or whichever one you like most, or whichever one your experience is more in line with. At the end of the day, any of them will get you to some end. And it's the relationship between your decision and thinking of what the end will be and how clear you know what the end will be that guides your choice in the separate actions itself. But the process of the actions you make compound and they create the outcome despite what you might have originally planned. So you have to be engaged in the process in order to get the certain outcome that you would like. And the way you do that is by keeping in mind the end, keeping in alignment like what you want and the outcome and whatever, but also in the process itself, enjoying that or being fully immersed in that. And that doesn't mean like I'm going to pick this up and then I'm going to put it down and then I'm going to move it in a circle, and that it's just while you're doing it, being aware of what's happening. Then your brain will do the background calculation of, is this getting me to the end I want? And then it will move you away or towards. The brain has a good reward system of like, is this action moving me towards the desired end or no? You just have to be really aware in order to get all the input it needs to do that calculation. If any of this makes sense. Just thinking out loud. So, how do we do this? And what am I going to get out of doing this? And what are you talking about, Dina? Well, giving an answer to this and giving a summary of what I've been rambling about would be going against the basic principle I'm discussing. Because looking for some final point, takeaway, jot dots from this discussion is still looking for an end instead of going through the process with me. The stuff I'm rambling about, it's not so much about the stuff itself, but the journey you take with me in the storytelling and in reading these quotes and in talking through my thoughts, no matter how sideways it goes, going through this ride should instill in you an understanding. Like, while you're listening to this, luckily it's on a digital platform. We live in 2025, you can replay it. And when you do, I hope that you pay attention to what did I bring up that had you thinking something interesting, or that felt really good, or that got you excited for something, or that maybe following the way I think took your brain in a new path that it hasn't before, and maybe it continues down a path you haven't tried before. And through that, you find something about yourself, about what you're doing. And that new understanding in the background will channel different actions, different outcomes. You don't even have to like consciously think about that. You just have to listen if you want. You just gotta listen, and in the background, it will do the necessary work. But you gotta be able to take in as much information so that it has a lot of information to work off of. How does your body feel like in the moment of listening to certain things I brought up? Or in your past, how did your body feel like when you were putting that effort to do something, or when you were flowing easily and doing something? What was the outcome of those things? Maybe writing this down will help you think through it. Maybe reading the sources that I'm citing for yourself and going through their storytelling will bring about some feelings or understanding or perspective or enjoyment that later on might make you more inclined to feel the same way again through whatever other process. Maybe really intensely listening to this or to the readings of Hegel or Ibn Sina or Audre Lorde, really taking in everything they're saying and imagining and visualizing and reading with them will help you get in that type of thinking. For the next time, you gotta be really present in doing something. Yeah, so read Audre Lorde's essay. It's only 7 pages, and it will get you thinking about cool stuff. The other things I've detailed are pretty long. So Ibn Sina's book is like really long, but you can just pick chapters and read. I didn't read the whole thing. Like, I just read different chapters that I think are interesting because it's basically a textbook. And if you don't care about, which I did at some point, like if you don't care about reading his thoughts about physics and maths in the beginning, and you just want to get to the point where he starts discussing psychology or medicine, do that. If you care more about what he thought about astrophysics and like maths and how he thought about it at the time, read that too. He was a great physician and he was a great Arab philosopher, and they were really good at math for a reason because they looked at things not like just in a logical way. It was also about life experience, and they let their feeling and sense for how things work guide them. And at the time, that's what gave them good insight because they did things while noticing a lot of things. They were not just like roaming the desert trading, they were really intensely watching how the sky looks like and how it functions. And if they had just been focused on trading, they would have never noticed those things. So I think that's like there's a lesson in that or something. Read Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. I haven't read the whole thing either. I just visit every so often chapters that I think are cool until eventually I'm done reading it. Some of these philosophy books, that's how you should read it. Like, why would you read it front to back? Like, it's more about they take you through a process of thinking of like this is true, therefore this is true. And then they go over all topics. They be going over like family, money, physics, math, health, psychology. Like just pick the one you want to learn about and read that chapter. The whole thing isn't really interconnected. It's like it's not episodes in a season, they're different movies. Um and yeah, this has been another reading reel, except it's not gonna be a reel because it's like really long. So it's gonna be maybe on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed this reading reel with Geraldina. And yeah, see ya.